Hey there, internets. So I had promised on some other social media some videos on how to do caucus. So this is why go, how to do it, and how it works. I'm going to break this into pieces. I'm going to try and keep the videos to 10 to 15 minutes, and just it's going to be part one, part two, part three, with at least a little bit of idea of what is being watched. So if you have maybe been to one but you didn't really understand what was going on, you can skip ahead. If you, because maybe you already know it. If you have never been to a caucus, I'm going to tell you why to go, even in primary states. If you have never, if you want to know how to win, I am going to do a video where I primarily discuss strategies and tactics. So the first question is why go? Well, in certain states they only do caucus, like Iowa. If in some states they have alternated between caucus, primary, and some sort of hybrid system. In Washington State, in the time since I went to my very first one, I have seen them use all three of those. That's another reason to go. Another reason is if you're thinking about getting involved in politics, it's a great way to dip your toe in. Because my first caucus was 2004, wasn't a contested presidential primary, but I went and I learned lessons. And every time I went, I learned something new. And it's gonna be a great fun time. I've made friends that have lasted me 20 years, almost now. I have seen people be that guy, and in the course of these videos, I will discuss in anecdotes of how to not be that guy or how to be effective and what you will see. Another reason is maybe you're in a primary state, and Colorado went from being a caucus state for 100 years up until 2016, and now they were going to do a primary, but the Colorado Supreme Court, I believe, unjustifiably removed Trump from the ballot. Now the Supreme Court of the United States will probably have to rule on this. Maine today, their Secretary of State unilaterally decided to agree with some. She's a Democrat. Agree with some challengers saying he'd committed insurrection and remove him from the Maine ballot. So your state may have to switch on the fly. Here's the thing: is your state may have to switch on the fly if, say, the Supreme they rule after you've had the caucus before the primary, like in Washington. I don't know that there's a challenge in Washington. I don't want to give Democrats any ideas because I consider this power a power nobody should have, absent a conviction for insurrection. You may have to change on the fly. You want to be part of that caucus process early. If you are from Washington State, specifically, the state convention, we are going to they've increased the number of delegates so they can have effectively a nominating convention, and instead of having 15 people run for governor and divide up the vote 15 ways, and two Democrats run and end up with two Democrats on the ballot, like what happened with our Secretary of State vote last year or in 2022. They want to avoid that. So at the state convention, they will have that. And the caucus process is how they're going to decide the delegates that make that decision. So you want to be involved with the caucus process, whether your state's a presidential primary or not. Another reason, if you watched my videos on proof Democrats are coming for your guns, and if you haven't, I highly encourage you to do so, because I spent some time digging through this. Those platforms are written by the people that have gone to the precinct caucuses, onto the county conventions, and they've been written by the base. You want to know what the base thinks? That's it. If you are a person who is, for instance, a Democrat saying, "Oh, I'm a Democrat and I like guns," well, then get that out of your platform if the Democrats aren't coming for the guns. It's in your platform, your base is pushing for it. So that's where that gets written. Resolutions can be discussed, and it had a resolution from Skagit County. I heard about this one from a person who's been involved in Republican politics before uh, I ever was. They had a resolution come out of a precinct, go make it to the county convention. And eventually, it went out all the way to become part of the national platform. So don't think that any of this is just completely banging your head against the wall. Those are reasons to go to caucus. So yes, from if you have a friend at the caucus and you can't make it, maybe you have to work. I arranged to have the day off. I am actually chairing a pooled caucus here, just blocks from my house. You can have somebody nominate you to go to your county convention, or maybe they have some sort of other district convention in your state. I mean, most of my assumptions are going to be based on Washington's rules, but if they don't vote you in, you're not on that. So you either have to have a friend that's going to the county convention, or you got to go to the caucus, or excuse me, a friend going to the caucus, or a friend going to the camp who can nominate you, or go yourself. Honestly, if I was just voting and there's 6 places for delegates and 6 places for alternates, and the person nominated isn't showing up, chances are I'm not even going to vote for them, honestly. But that's up to the people. In Washington, they increased the number of delegates, at least in my county, to the county convention, such that it's highly unlikely that you're not going to make it on. But in cases where that does occur, maybe there's only a handful of people and you get a whole bunch of people that show up to caucus, and then you may have to have more serious voting. So that's why I did go to the caucuses. So how do they work? For starters, caucuses are not primaries. Now, the national rules, which I've got a Ballotpedia page that I will link to in the description below, does have the rules for selecting and binding delegates. The National Party has adopted a rule that says if there's a straw poll or a primary, that binds the delegates on at least the first ballot. Here's the thing. Let's say we need a backup plan. The Supreme Court removes Trump from the ballot and says he can't be president. Something happens to Trump. I hope it doesn't, but the man's a junk food junkie. Like me, he likes his Wendy's and KFC. That catches up to a guy who's 76 sometimes. For whatever reason, he's not able to be our presidential candidate. Okay, what then? Maybe he's not as popular as people think, and now you have a divided convention. The caucus matters because after that first ballot, the delegates at the national convention will be unbound, or a large number of them, and anything can happen. So it is not a primary. When it's been caucus only and you didn't know exactly who it was there, sometimes in 2012, and this is part of why they adopted some of the rules that they have, Ron Paul came in third in Iowa on caucus day, but his supporters worked the system to where when he left Iowa, he had 22 of 28 delegates. So this can work to highly organized campaigns' advantage. So that's the first thing to realize. You're going to show up. You are going to have to spend some time there. You're going to sign in. They're going to figure out what precinct you're in, and you're going to go off with the people from that precinct. Unlike voting, it's not just a cast your vote and goodbye. Your goal is to get your candidate's supporters to the county convention. And in Washington, that might not be presidential candidate supporters. That could be statewide, for the statewide races. I'm not sure about the Senate election this year, but there is a governor's election, and you've got Semi Bird is one of the 2 names being thrown out around most often, and Dave Reichert. So we could see when I get to strategies and tactics, some of those strategies and tactics might come in handy if you're a supporter of either any of those candidates. You're going to hear speeches, you're going to hear people talking, trying to convince people to advance them. Now, voting can only occur between a certain time. In Washington, I believe it's 10 to 12. If you don't show up between those times, you can't be a delegate or get somebody to nominate you. They can't put you on after the fact. That can create challenges if somebody wants to dispute it, and that has happened. I remember when I was helping at the Republican office, somebody came in 2012 and said this guy added a bunch of people as delegates after we'd already been done voting. Apparently, a bunch of people he knew who were all Romney supporters. I don't know what happened to that challenge, but it got forwarded onto the chair and onto the credentials committee. That can result in an entire delegation being gone. So read your rules. It's to everyone's advantage that they follow them. So you're going to have a vote. After a certain number of votes, typically, you will see the top vote getters get on, but typically the first 3 or 4 or 2 or 3 ballots, 50% of the people present have to vote, or who cast a ballot have to vote for that delegate to advance. And that will continue on, and I will discuss that at a later time when we start talking county convention, state convention. 50% plus 1 have to vote that person on, or they don't get on. After that last, when they get down to the last ballot, it's the top vote getters. So if there's less people that want to be candidates or be delegate or standing as candidates to be delegates, and then there are slots, everybody's going to get on it in the end. So the strategies and tactics at that level do not work. Then you're going to have a chance to discuss resolutions. You can make a resolution that could go to the county convention. There'll also be opportunities to discuss what people want to see in the platform. Usually there'll be a survey, something like that. If there's a straw poll, do not think the straw poll is the end thing. Now in 2012, this is a true story. They had a straw poll. They checked the straw poll. People came in. Romney people, one after the other, came in my precinct. I'd never seen so much turnout. Checking Romney and left. I invited them to stay. None of them stayed. Had they stayed, I was a Santorum delegate. We're going to support Santorum, and your precinct committee officers are automatic delegates. If you want to know how that works, watch the last video, because I'll talk about the aftermath of this process. When they left, they weren't voting. So what happened was we had, I think, 3 delegates allowed and 3 alternates. There was not a single Romney delegate coming out of my precinct. And had they stuck around and stood together and used some of these tactics and strategies I will discuss in a later video, they would have been able to shut out every non-Romney delegate. Period. They had the numbers if they would have stuck around. So do stick around until the voting is done. You'll probably might make some friends. Might have a good time, and you'll get to meet other conservatives. So that's how that can go. Doesn't matter whether you're a Trump supporter, Chris DeSantis supporter, Nikki Haley supporter, Ramaswamy supporter, or even a Chris Christie supporter. If you go, you have the chance to become a delegate, and that becomes a numbers game. And this is a team game, but that's where you're going to find it. That's how it works on caucus day. Now, Washington State is using a presidential primary right now. That will determine proportionally, and the rules for the national vote is any state with their primary before their caucus, if they are a caucus state. Washington's not using the caucus to allocate delegates. So when I say primary state, that's how they're allocating the delegate or finding the delegates. Caucus state, they're doing it through the caucus system. They have to make it proportional. There's no winner take all before the 1st of March, or excuse me, before the 15th of March. Only certain states can go before the 1st of March. So understand that in those processes, it is purely a numbers game. It is get out the vote thing. So if you are a supporter of any presidential candidate, get a hold of your local chair for that campaign. We got 2 weeks to go for Washington, and just over 2 weeks to go for Iowa. If anyone in Iowa sees this video, and find out who's organizing slates, who's getting people together to make that happen. Because you don't just want an allocation via the primary, you want loyal delegates going forward, because that will matter in the strategies, especially in the event of we have to have a backup plan, or if we have to have if we happen to have a divided convention, which hasn't happened in like 100 years. So get a hold of them. If you're in Washington State and you're for one of the statewide races, you might want to find out if they're starting to form a slate for the candidate you prefer for governor. And if they're not, maybe you should. So that's why to go to caucus. That's how it happens on the day of. I'm going to wrap this one up, and then we'll be talking about the county convention, state convention in the next video, and some of the things that go on there with the platform resolutions and how to not be that guy. Until then, you all take care.